Hi everyone and welcome to the second edition of Tutorial Tuesdays. My name is Jake and every week I bring you a new Unity game development tutorial. This week I'm going to be giving you a nice short quick intro to sprite animation in Unity, and so I guess I'll just show you really quickly what we're going to do. We're just animating this series of sprites, which I got from opengameart.org. You can find a link to the sprites in the description below. And so basically, we've just got him set up to different states so that he can run, then he idles, he can go from running to jumping, and he can go from idle to jumping as well. So just to be clear, this is not a character controller tutorial. This is just very much focused on the animator. So we can go ahead and get started with making all of this work. So as with any thing that you're going to do in Unity, you're going to want to start with a new project, unless of course you're working with an existing one. I'm going to call this one, let's see, Intro to Sprite Animation. Tutorial Tuesdays. Intro to Sprite Animation. And for this one we're going to be selecting the 2D preset. Go ahead and create the project. So when you first start with the 2D preset, you're going to wind up with something like this. Although these windows probably won't be here and your layout will be a little bit different. I've set this up in a custom way. So I guess I'll close these for now. And the first thing we're going to do is bring in our assets. Now I've got three different sets of sprites here just to kind of cover all the different ways that you might be presented with sprites that you're going to bring into your game. We're only going to be animating one of these, but I wanted to at least show you how to import different types of sprites, whether they're coming from a fixed size sprite sheet, a varying size sprite sheet, or as individual sprites. So you can download links to all of these in the description. They're all from opengameart.org. So here we go. We just drag our assets onto the Unity icon, then drop them into our project. So we've got these three sets here. I'm just going to create another folder here called sprites. Drop all of these in there. There we go. Now this is very important. If you expand the sprite sheet right now, you can see there's only one. And if we drag that over to our scene, that's what you get, is this entire sprite sheet, which is not at all what you want. So we'll delete that, and you select the thing that you're going to import. And if it's more than one sprite on the sheet, as you can see here, and as in this one, then you're going to want to go to where it says Sprite Mode Single, and you'll change it to Multiple. And then you'll want to hit Apply, and then you'll have to define where the boundaries of each different frame of animation are. Or where each individual sprite is. So we'll go to the sprite editor, and we can see in this one that not all of the sprites are the same size. In fact, you can see this guy's quite a bit larger, and so is this than these ones. So what we do is click this little slice button here, and we can leave it to automatic, and Unity will automatically look at where there are pixels in the image and try to determine where to separate this sprite sheet into individual sprites. So if we click slice, Unity will draw these nice little squares around each sprite, and if you find that there's something that's not quite right, you can drag that out a little bit, resize them to be whatever size you want. You can change this pivot point, which is basically going to, if I put them all here, say I put one there and I put one here, then those pivot points are going to always line up in any animations that you do. However, we can just leave what Unity's given us here. We're not actually going to be animating this guy. And then once you're done setting up your sprites, you just click Apply, and that will, as you can see over here, create individual sprites for each frame in the sprite sheet. Also, another note, this is a bit of an aside. I'm just going to change the scale of this guy to something like 10 by 10 by 10. You can see how he's really fuzzy. This is another import option. So this is a pixel art character, and it's not even necessarily something you need to consider just with pixel art, but with any kind of sprite in general. A lot of the time you will want to remove this thing that's called a filter that Unity puts on things. So here it says filter mode. If you select the main sprite sheet here and you go to filter mode, it's by default set to bilinear, so that's this kind of fuzzy thing, which actually looks alright a lot of the time. But if you find that your graphics look fuzzy, you can go to point, no filter, click apply, and see how that sharpens those graphics right up. And so yeah, that's how you import a sprite sheet with sprites of varying size. Next we'll look at this. I'm going to delete him. We can look at this orc base one. So again, you're going to want to change the sprite mode from single to multiple, because as you can see there are multiple. You hit apply, and then we can go back into the sprite editor. Here we've got them all, and we could do automatic again, but you see that these are all different size, and this is kind of like the RPG styled sprite sheet where they're all the same size. And so this might give us problems where the guy kind of jitters around during animations, and we don't want that. So rather than do automatic, we'll say grid by cell size, and this one happens to be 16 pixels by 18 pixels. We then hit slice, and it evenly divides it up by cell size, as you can see. And again, you can resize those if you like, but there's no need to. And then apply, close that. If we expand this, we've got all the different frames. Again, we can bring him out, scale him up again, and just to show you that filtering thing again, see how fuzzy that is? If we go to point, no filter, and click apply, perfectly sharp there again. So we can delete this now and get into our last set of sprites, which is the one we're actually going to be animating. And it's this nice ninja sprite. So there's nothing really that needs to be done to any of these in the import settings. If you like, you can change the format to true color. That'll make sure that all the colors are exactly as they are when viewing this in some external image viewer, rather than having Unity compress the file, which can sometimes lead to color loss, but in this case it's going to be okay. So I'm just going to bring out this first sprite here. It's going to say attack 000 because that's the name of the individual sprite, but I'm just going to rename it to Ninja. Now there are two components that seem to confuse people when they're first getting introduced to animation in Unity, and those are the animator and an animation. An animator is basically your animation manager. Your animator has different animations inside of it, and you access the animator to tell it which animation to play. So the first thing you want to attach to your character that you're going to be animating is this Animator Controller. And if we go to the Animator window, I'm just going to dock this down here. You can see that it's empty because we have no animations yet. What we're going to want to do is we could create an animation by going create animation, but it's a little bit easier if you just open up the animation window. And remember again that an animator controls animations. A character really doesn't have animations, it has an animator, and the animator is what has the animations. So if we go to animator and then animation, we want to select the character that we are going to animate, and we can see that this changes down here to begin animating Ninja, create an animation clip. So we'll go ahead and create one. We'll create a new folder in here. We'll call this animations, and we'll select that, and rather than having it be new animation, we'll start with an idle animation, and we can go ahead and save that. Now we've got this dope sheet, it's called, for our idle animation. And you can select this to see a drop down of all your animations on this animator, as well as having the option to create a new animation. However, we're just going to go ahead and get this guy to have an idle animation to start. And so if you select all of the frames that you want to be in this animation, so long as they're in order, then you can just drag them in anywhere in this dope sheet and let it go, and it'll automatically line those all up for you. And then you can sample the animation just by clicking play. And so that's going a little bit fast. So if you mess with this samples, this is how many frames per second I believe that you want the animation to run at. So I'm just going to go to the standard 24 frames per second, which looks a little bit better. If you go too low, say you go to 5, you can see that it starts to jitter. Even with 12, that looks okay, but it's a little bit jittery there. If you go to 24, it's nice and smooth. So now we have this idle animation, and it's just playing by itself. If you go to the animator window, you can see this has now been brought in. This was all empty before, and now we have this entry. So once it enters, this is called a transition. It will go directly to the idle state. So if we go ahead and hit play, we can see that he's indeed idling. However, what I wanted to show you was how you can view the state of an animation in the animator window. So typically it will show you this, but perhaps it's not doing it because there are no other animation states. So let's go ahead and get another one in there. And so maybe we'll go to actually, you know, it may just have been because I didn't have the ninja selected. There, we've got this that's the reason it wasn't showing this before, is because I didn't have a specific game object selected here. So you can see each time that fills up, that's the progress of that animation playing. Every time it gets to the end, the animation is finished and is restarting. So this animation is set to loop. In fact, if we look at the animation here, we can see that loop time is true. If we uncheck that, it'll play once and then he'll just stand there and stop. So he just stops when that animation completes rather than looping. But we do in fact want this to loop. So now we can go ahead and get our next animation set up, and then we'll just create, we'll say run, and we'll go into our animations folder and call this run. So again, we'll go through the same process of just finding all of the run frames, grabbing all of those. So it's just I'm clicking the first one, holding shift, and then clicking the last one, and then just clicking and dragging these over into the animation window. And you can see that you've got, for some reason it's only giving me 5 frames there, so I'm going to delete that and just try this one more time. Give the samples at 24. If we hit play, so for some reason we're missing some frames there. I don't know why that is. Let's try just deleting this animation. Something funny happened, I think, with my drag that may have caused a bug in Unity. So if we go to Ninja, and then we go to create a new clip, and again we create the run animation, and then we select all of our run frames, which there are 5. Let's just verify that, or there are 10 of them, and we're verifying that all of these are different. Highlight all of those, select them all, drag them into the animator. Now we've got our 10 showing up. So that was some kind of bug within the Unity editor. We'll keep the samples the same as our other clip, which was 24, and if we hit play, we've got a nice run animation there. And if we look over to the animator, we now have these 2 states. We have idle and run. However, there's no way for us to currently get the run animation to play because we don't have anything, any of what we call a transition. So in order to do that, you right click one animation state and you click make transition. It'll give you this little arrow that just follows your cursor wherever it goes, and you click on the animation that you want to move to. Now when you do this, you only want to create transitions from states that make sense. So say your character has a sleeping animation. You wouldn't want to transition from a sleeping animation directly to a fight animation, because that probably wouldn't make sense. Rather, you'd have a sleeping animation and then maybe an idle animation, which that would then transition to your fight animation. Anyhow, this idle is going to transition to run, and run is also going to be able to transition to idle. So if you're idle, you'll be able to start running, and if you're running, you'll be able to just return to idle. Now, in order to make these transitions work right now, because we have, if you scroll down here, you can see in our conditions list. So I've just selected the transition by clicking the arrow, and then looking over here in the inspector, you can see the conditions and that the list is empty. If your list is empty, it's going to by default go by exit time. So once the animation is finished, it'll transition to run, and because this transition is the same, it doesn't have any conditions, then once the run has finished, it'll go back to idle, and so it'll just keep doing this over and over again, going through idle to run, run to idle, idle to run, and we can see that if we click play. So you can see that that's happening. Now it looks kind of funny because there's this offset time here where Unity tries to blend your animations. I haven't found a usefulness for that when doing sprite animations like this. So I'll show you how to handle that for sprite animations as well. And also make these transitions make a little more sense rather than just running around. However, before we get into that, we might as well make our last animation state, which is our jump. So we can go to animation, the animation window here, click this little drop down, then create new clip again, as we've been doing, and we're going to want to name this one run, or sorry, not run, this one's going to be jump. And as we've done before, we find all of the frames that we want, shift click to select them, drag them out. We'll change the samples to 24. If we hit play, again, this isn't working. I don't know why Unity is doing this to me tonight. Okay, if we delete all these, let's try just bringing these in one more time. Although I have a feeling I have to delete the animation. Looks okay. There we go. That's better now. If we hit play, basically he's got this takeoff, and then he just kind of hangs there, and then he puts his leg out to drop again. And so if we go back to our animator, we can see now we have this new state which isn't connected, so we have to create that again. So we're going to want our character to be able to go from running to jumping. We're going to want him to be able to go from idle to jumping, and also from jump to idle and jump to run. So again, to create a transition, you right click an animation state, click make transition, and then click on the state you want to transition to. We'll do that again for jump to run, so we've got one going both ways. We go from jump to idle, and then idle to jump. Now we've got to set up some animation parameters, which are how we're going to communicate through code to our animator to tell it which animation to play. And so this is a very simple example. If you get into more advanced animations, you have to actually think about the logic a little bit more, and we can see that a little bit in the small amount of code that we're going to write. However, let's get our parameters set up so that we can get to that next step. So we'll click the parameters tab here. I'll say the list is empty, so we can just click the plus button, and it'll ask you what kind you want to create. There are four. There's a float, which is basically just a decimal number, so that might be used for passing in a player's current movement speed to determine whether it's playing a walking or a running animation. Then there's an int, which really could be used for the same kind of purposes. Then there's a bool, which you will want to set to true or false, so that's a boolean value, basically on, off, yes, no, true, false type thing. And that's good for having control over when you set this parameter. But if you want Unity to take over, this trigger parameter type is one that's new in Unity 4, so it's been around for a little while now, but it performs basically the same as the bool. However, you never have to set the trigger to false. It will automatically set to false on its own, so it's like you just kind of fire and forget the trigger. So the first one we're going to want is run, and we'll make this a bool. We'll call it run. So you see this little check mark for booleans, and we'll leave it off. And then we'll also want to use a trigger for jump. And so our run will serve to go from idle to run, and also from run to idle. It'll also serve to go from jump to run and jump to idle. So if run is true, we're looking at our run state. If run is false, we'll be looking at our idle state. And then the jump trigger is going to be what allows idle to go to jump and run to go to jump. So we've got everything set up here. So we can go ahead and actually look at these transitions and set them up properly. So if you click this transition, we can see that it has an exit time, which means it's going to wait for the idle animation to finish before it goes to run. We don't want that to happen. We want it to go to run as soon as we set that run trigger to true. However, before we do that, just so you can see the difference here, if we give it the run condition and we say that when it's true, then we want to do this transition. Remember, it's idle to run, so when run is true, then transition from idle to run. Then we play this and we fiddle with our parameters here. So if we go, yeah, okay, so right now it's kind of going all over the place. It's going from idle to jump, jump to run. So I guess we'll set all these up first, and then, actually no, this is quick enough. We'll get rid of the transitions to jump so that it's only going to transition to run. So he's just idling until we tell it to run. We tell it to run, and you saw it took a second for it to get back for it to get to the run state there. It's not immediate, so it waits for idle to finish playing, and you can actually see that message being sent across the transition. It's saying, it looks, well, it's not really a message, that's how far along in the transition it is, because Unity will blend animations for you, which is useful in 3D, not so much in sprite animation. So in order to make that fully responsive to our parameter changes, we're going to want to change the has exit time, and we're going to want to expand this settings. We'll say it's not a fixed duration. So now as soon as we click run, it'll go right to the run animation. Click run, it goes right away. However, you can see there's still a little bit of a delay here on the run. So we're going to, and right now this is just exiting from the run on the exit time. So we'll do the same thing to this fixed duration. Usually this is what you're going to want, is to get rid of this fixed duration anytime you're doing sprite animation, because it's just, you can't really blend two different sprite animations. It just isn't a thing. It doesn't really work. So if you click run, it goes right there. And see, this still isn't working, and that's because we haven't set up our transition here. So our condition here is going to be, again, run, but it's going to be false in this case. So now if I sit here and I just spam this checkbox, we can see him going back and forth very quickly. It's very responsive. It's happening as soon as I do it, because we've gotten rid of that delay. And we can bring back the run to jump transition. We might as well go ahead and set this up now. So we're going to want to select our jump. Notice how there's no value here, because like I said, it just automatically is set to true, and then it sets itself to false again later. And so we're going from run to jump. We're not going to want an exit time, so we don't want to wait for the run animation to finish. And so again, we'll uncheck that fixed duration for the same reason. Now if we hit play and then we click jump, then he'll go right from run to jump, but only if we've first put it into the run state. So currently we have no transition from idle to jump, so if I say jump, nothing is going to happen. That's why you need those transitions, because the animator has no idea of how to get from idle to jump. It can get from jump to idle, because we see this arrow going this way, but it cannot get from idle to jump. So if we click run, he'll go into the run state and he'll stay there. He can go back to the idle state if we uncheck. Go back, and now if we click jump, he'll go immediately into the jump state. Once that finishes, he'll go back into the run state. Now that's just kind of happening by fluke. It could have chosen to do this one, but it's not for whatever reason. But what we're going to want to do here is, it does have an exit time, but we're also going to want, and it is going to be a fixed duration, because we want the jump animation to finish. However, we also want to check that run is true before we do that, and we'll also check here that run is false, so it will know whether to go to the run or idle state. So if we click play again, he's idling. We click jump, nothing happens. However, if we leave that trigger on and we say run, it'll go to run, and then did it do it? Run off, jump, jump, and then will he jump for us? Yeah, see, he goes right into that jump state once he hits run. So now we can click, if we make our last transition, which is from idle to jump, and we click that, and then we want to say jump. Now we've got a fully functioning animation state machine here in our animator, so we can go from idle to running, from jumping, or sorry, from running to jumping, from jumping back to running, and then from running back to idle. Then we can go from idle to jumping. See, something funny's happening here. I don't think we changed our state to jump, so no exit time, no fixed duration, because as soon as our player jumps, we want the jump animation to play. We don't want any kind of delay there. So let's try this again. So from idle to jump, it goes right away. Once the jump's done, it goes back to idle. Run to jump, and then back to idle. So there we have it. Now we'll look at accessing the animator from code so that we don't have to fiddle with these things here to actually make things happen, because your player is not going to be able to do that. So here we go. Again, this is not a character controller tutorial. This isn't going to explain how to make a character move around, but it'll tell you at least how to access the animator and set the state based on what your player is doing. So I'm going to close all this stuff, although that's what we're going to be writing. And I'm going to come back in here, make our scripts folder, and go to our Ninja. We're going to create a new component, and we'll just call it Ninja Controller. It's going to be super simple. The only thing it's going to be doing is interacting with the animator so that we can make all this happen from key presses rather than inside the editor. Alright, so now we've got this open. There's only going to be one thing we're going to need, and we're going to need access to the animator. So we'll say private animator, we'll just call it animator. And then we'll say animator equals get component animator. So this is going to look at the game object that this script is attached to and see if it has an animator component. If it does, it's going to store that in here. Then we're going to just check for some key presses here. We'll say if input dot get key down, and we'll start with, say, run. So keycode dot D. So if the player presses D, then we'll set the run state. So we'll say animator dot set bool. Now remember that when we set up our parameters, we set up the run parameter as a boolean. If we look over here, it's got this checkbox, which means it's a boolean. And so if we go back here, and that's why we're saying set bool. So it by default gives you this here into ID. That's really not intuitive. If you just put like a 0 in there, when you're reading your code later, you're not going to probably remember what animation state that is. So rather, I like to use this one, which is string name. So you can say set the run boolean to true if they press D. Then we're going to want to copy this. So if they let go of the D key, so get key up, then we'll set the run boolean to false. And then lastly, if input dot get key down, keycode dot W for jump, then we can say animator dot set trigger, and all we do is pass in a string. You could do the int again, but again it's harder to read what your code is doing, so we pass in the string and we say jump, and we don't need to give it a value because it knows anytime you call set trigger, set it true until that action has occurred, and then set it back to false. So now this is all set up, and we've got a way to actually animate this at runtime from the keyboard. And really you'd be making these calls in whatever code you currently have. In this case, for whenever the player starts running, make this call. Whenever the player stops running, make this call. Whenever you start a player's jump, make this call, and put that in your code. But if we hit play now, we should have our character responding to our controls. So I'm not pressing anything, I press D, and he runs. I let go, he stops. I can kind of just do that very quickly, and you see it's happening instantly. So I can jump from idle, I can jump from run, and I'm holding D this whole time, and I can jump while I'm running and then let go of run, and he'll go to the idle state. So there you have it. That's sprite animation in Unity in a nutshell. If you liked this video, you found it helpful, then please subscribe to our channel for more. Like I said, these will be coming out every week. I'm open to suggestions, so leave those in the comments section. If you were stuck with anything, or anything I said was confusing or didn't make sense, also you can leave a comment down there. I do answer all questions that might get asked. Visit our Facebook page, that's Fidelum Games on Facebook. Check out our developer journal on gamedev.net. Check out the trailer to our upcoming game Pixel Zombie Shooter, and check out our other videos. Thanks for watching. See you next week.